Now then, explorers, welcome to Shaun Explores. So in this episode, we're going to be looking at the Naturehike Cloudpeak 2, and we're going to be putting it up against the Kazoo Venus 2P. And the reason behind that is on the outset, they look identical. So what I'm going to do is we're going to pitch the Cloudpeak 2 and the Venus 2P, and we're going to understand how the Venus 2P can be half the price of the Naturehike. Now the first things to consider are the pack size. They are pretty similar. I have weighed this earlier on, and the Naturehike Cloudpeak 2 comes in at 2.4 kilograms. The Kazoo comes in at 2.5. Now something that's interesting is the Naturehike Cloudpeak 2 has an extra ground sheet in here, included in the weight. So the Kazoo still comes in at heavier. What we'll do, we'll unpack them and we'll have a look at some of the bits that you get in each bag. So we'll start with the Naturehike. As I mentioned, with the Naturehike you do get a separate ground sheet. You get your poles, little peg bag, and the tent itself. With the Kazoo, that feels different straight away, the fabric. With the Kazoo you get the tent, peg bag and the poles. So something I'm interested in, first off, is the tent poles. I want to compare the two and see if there are any differences. Now they look pretty much identical to me. Let's get the end of one of these and have a look. Let's have a look at this one. So we're looking at identical tent poles, exactly the same cord inside. I'd go as far as saying these are made in exactly the same factory. So that's interesting. Now for a look at what's inside the peg bags. So the Kazoo, obviously it's not been set up properly yet, so you do have your guy lines. And you get some pretty standard looking aluminium pegs. I'm not a fan of these, they don't tend to last too long, tend to bend quite easily. Not the end of the world though, because you can replace them. Now with the Cloudpeak 2, you do get some rather snazzy purple stakes. Okay, they're like a mini version of the MSR pegs that you can buy. They're not too bad, but what I like to do with all my tents is stop them out for these stakes. Just a bit bigger, same design as them. Anyway, that's the first real difference that I've noticed. So already, not only do they look very similar, the poles are exactly the same. They've got to be made in the same factory. Let's have a look at the rest of the tent and see what other similarities we can find. Let's see if there's any differences at all between these tents. So I'm not going to give you the full setup video, we're just going to give it one of these. Now I've made a right cock up. I've left the bib for that tent at home in the kit cupboard. Thankfully we've got an exact replica to show you what it looked like with the bib on it. If you like kit reviews for all things wild camping and outdoors, why not consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell notification. That way you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. So first impressions, apart from the bib being missing on the Naturehike, they look pretty much exactly the same. We already know the poles are the same, so let's take a little closer look and have a little look around at some of the features. Okay, so on the Naturehike, you have these little plastic clips that clip to the geodesic pole structure. Now they are quite tight on this. They're a nice fit, good quality plastic, and they're going to hold on. Whereas on the Kazoo, Same idea with the same clips, but they're a much cheaper, poor quality plastic, and also they fit. Although that sounded like it snapped on well, it's because of the tension in the tent. They're actually quite a looser fit. I don't know if you can see that, but anyway, that's 1-0 to the Naturehike. Next we're going to have a little look at the door. On the Naturehike you have this piece of material that goes over the door, and all it does is it protects any water getting in under the zip. It's elasticated and it does its job pretty well. Coming down to the bottom, you have some nice Velcro here, and your zip. Easy. So you can zip that up, and that reveals your tent in here. On the Kazoo, pretty much the same idea. In fact, it feels very similar. Elasticated door, exactly the same design. Come down to the bottom, Velcro in exactly the same place. The zip looks exactly the same. So, get that open up the tent and reveal the inner. So looking at the tent inner, you have this nice high bathtub and your material coming up quite high. We'll measure it as coming up to the second clip up on your pole on one side and the same on the other. You've got the mesh higher up, obviously to allow breathability. It does breathe pretty well, this tent. It's not necessarily a 4-season tent as they suggest, because you'd expect the material to come up much higher. On the Kazoo, pretty much exactly the same. Okay, again, the material comes up to around the second clip. Nice high bathtub again, material coming up high with the vented mesh. In fact, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same inner. The only thing I have noticed which is a bit off with the quality is, as you can see, this bit of material runs into here and this one's higher here. On the Naturehike, a bit more quality has gone into the craftsmanship. I must admit, I do actually prefer the shade of yellow on the inner on the Kazoo tent, and I may actually swap this inner into the Naturehike. On second thoughts, I don't think I will be using it. It's very crinkly, feels like a very cheap material. It's also not ripstop nylon, which is interesting. So the inner material on the Cloudpeak is actually much softer. It's also ripstop as well, so if you do get a little tiny tear in it, what it'll do is it'll stop the tear from spreading any further. That won't happen with the Kazoo. So thankfully the bathtub is made out of ripstop nylon, so that is a bit better than the material itself for the inner. So plenty of space inside, as you would expect with it being a copy of the Cloudpeak. Loads of head height, so you can sit up here and chill out if the heavens open. It is pretty much exactly the same design. I wouldn't be surprised if this was built in the same factory from exactly the same build sheet. The dimensions are an exact replica of the Cloudpeak 2. As you can see, inside the Cloudpeak 2, there's pretty much no difference at all, other than the materials of this so far. So we'll crack on and have a look at the out-of-fly. So the first thing that struck me with this tent when I took it out of the packaging was the fly sheet material. It certainly seems thicker than that on the Naturehike Cloudpeak 2. The Naturehike Cloudpeak 2 is a sil nylon. This doesn't feel like it has silicone on it, if I'm being honest. It just feels like a basic ripstop nylon. Okay, so I've just found a big negative on this tent. Just having a look at the seams, and they're not taped. So this tent doesn't have taped seams. Now the Naturehike, as you can see, has fully taped seams. Excuse the dirt inside, this was last used in the woods. I do need to give it a bit of a clean. Okay, so a little bit about the fabrics on the tent. The Kazoo is a 210T polyester fly sheet, and it's polyester all with inside it. The Naturehike is a 20D sil nylon. So sil nylon 20D is far better than the material used with this. This has a 3000mm head, waterproof, index, but as we know the tapes aren't sealed, so you'll have to seam seal this particular tent, whereas the Cloudpeak has 4,000mm head, waterproof, but also has tape seams. It's not going to be very waterproof at the minute without the bib over the top of it, but that's my fault. So that's quite an interesting difference between the two tents. The Kazoo isn't tape seamed, whereas the Naturehike Cloudpeak 2 is. So with the Kazoo, you're going to have to seam seal this. Just something to bear in mind. Now we know that this can withstand heavy rain. I just hope that the Kazoo will do the same. Looking at the quality of the stitching on the Naturehike, you can see it's been done really nicely. Nice and neat, straight with all the fabric. And when you come to the end, it's been double stitched to make sure nothing comes undone. With the Kazoo, not so much the same. As you can see, the fabric's slipped at the bottom there. It's not as carefully done as a Naturehike. And when you come to the end, there's no double stitching. So that's a concern for me. So quite an important question about these two tents is going to be the price. The Naturehike Cloudpeak 2 can be had for around £125 from AliExpress. Now, AliExpress is like a Chinese version of eBay. The products do come from China, and you may end up waiting around 4 weeks to get your tent. But if you want to save a few quid, it's probably the best option to go. The Kazoo, I paid £49 off Amazon, and it was here the next day. So we're talking more than half the price. Is it half as good? I would say it's pretty good value tent. For £50, if you look on the market for what else you're getting, you're not going to get anything as big and as spacious as that. Yes, there are some concerns with some of the stitching on it, and the material, as I said, it's nowhere near as good as the Naturehike Cloudpeak 2, but for £50 I think it's definitely a worthwhile buy. You can also get this tent in green, similar to the Cloudpeak, however it's got a red bathtub, but as you'd imagine it's going to be exactly the same quality and exactly the same specs. So the Naturehike, one of my prized possessions in my wild camping kit. I've let it down a little bit by missing the bib and leaving that at home, but I'm sure you've seen it in my other videos, and you'll have seen plenty of videos on this. If you are interested in buying the Naturehike Cloudpeak 2, I suggest you check out a video by Davey Boy Outdoors, where he runs through a list of modifications that he's done to his to make the tent even better. I'll put a little link up here or here, I forget wherever it goes. Just noticed it's a Cloudpeak 2, has a double zip, so what you can do is you can unzip the fly sheet and have it down like that, whereas the Kazoo, it's just a single zip, so you can only undo it from the bottom. I'm not sure if that makes too much of a difference. I can't see me zipping it down from the top anyway. So I guess the question on everyone's lips is, should you buy the Kazoo? Would I buy the Kazoo? Well, I already have. £125 for the Naturehike Cloudpeak 2 represents exceptional value for that kind of tent. For what you get in terms of space, the quality of it, 20D ripstop nylon, taped seams, everything that you get with that tent is fantastic. The Kazoo for 50 quid is bonkers value. Yeah, there might be troubles with some of the tents. There isn't with this particular one. It's not the same spec, but for 50 quid, that is worth every penny. I hope you liked the video. I hope that gave you a good insight into the Kazoo Venus 2P. Basically just a rip off of the Cloudpeak 2. And I wouldn't say they've done too bad a job either. So if you did enjoy the video, please give us a thumbs up. If you've got any further questions on the tent, either of the tents, put a comment in the comment section below. And don't forget, if you want to be reminded of any of my future videos, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification, and your phone will send you a notification every time I upload. Nice one. Oosh!